Welcome everyone to another episode of Tectonic Lounge by Code Engine Studio. Today we're keeping this in-house and have Steve Choi, our Chief Operating Officer, also our project manager, guru extraordinaire. I think that's officially on the business card these days, or used to be. Steve's been with the Code Engine Studio for a while. Welcome, Steve. Kind of give us a quick intro on yourself, please.
Oh, great. It's great to be a part of a podcast. I've never been before, but it's a first that I can cross off my list. I've been with Code Engine for about the last 7 years, but before joining Code Engine, I had a long history of being in tech. I had all my career at Intel Corporation. I started off as just a general IT support person, but then moved on to operation support for a few small sites, as well as projects and mergers and acquisitions. And so I've had a long dealing with software because most of the people I oversaw at Intel were software developers.
Well, thanks for joining us. The reason I wanted to have you on is to kind of meet one of our goals for the webcast is to demystify some of the mumbo jumbo technological terminology, because we get into these terms and people throw them around: phases, MVPs, milestones, sprints. And while we're not looking to teach a class on Agile or Scrum here, I want you to help us work through having an understanding how a business person who may not be a tech person, may not be a Scrum certified, PM or project manager or product owner or Scrum master, really to help them understand the flow of prioritizing things and arranging things. So with that in mind, what the heck is an MVP when it comes to software development? And I guess it does not mean most valuable player.
I wish, but no, I mean, MVPs usually stand for a minimum viable product. And what we're really getting down to when we talk about developing software products, especially, is really asking the base question of what makes my product valuable in the end. What is that main thing? What is that secret sauce? And a lot of times what ends up happening is we usually craft solutions that sometimes are overcomplicated or kind of build a lot of things because we feel emotional attachment to all these bells and whistles, what we think are valuable. But a lot of the tough discussion is actually getting down to that very minimum of saying, what is our base secret sauce? What makes our product go? What sets us apart from everyone else that at the baseline we can build and test that assumption out? Because a lot of times we spend a lot of money building a lot of things that we may not need.
Right. So just to make sure we emphasize this point, when we say it's valuable to someone, I would say it's not just even being internally valuable. I think we're talking more about even valuable to the potential customers, to those who are looking to buy our product, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I think there's value for, of course, all of us who work on things, as well as value to the person who wants this product made. But in the end, the market dictates what is valuable, and that's the thing that we never can control. The market determines value based on need. And we do our best to ideate what that might be. But I think I was reading an article not that long ago about Microsoft Edge, where they built that browser and they packed it full of features where, like, I think initial release, like 60% of what they built was never really valued or used by the end user. And so it was wasted effort, wasted time, and wasted money.
So from a business perspective, I think I remember from the discipline entrepreneurship course that I've taught and took myself, the comment was an MVP for a vehicle is not a car without a roof. It is a skateboard because it's getting you from point A to point B. So we're looking at identifying the core business functionality that really, like you said, is the special sauce that drives forward your product and focusing on that. So as a PM, you're working with a customer and they bring you a giant scope and they say, everything is equally important. Everything is top priority. How do you talk them off that ledge?
Well, that's always a tough one, right? It depends on the emotional investment that people have with their project, which, of course, any product is like a baby in terms of it's what they invested their thoughts and energy into. The challenge is that I think in most things we tend to be optimistic on our ideas and strategies, but the end result is, how do you talk people off the edge is to talk about the real data, what it would cost to actually implement all that, but also talk about the data points of, look, there's an old book out there about software estimation that is like one of the prime books about this. And they talk about how engineers generally are very optimistic about what they can deliver based on a budget or a time. And a lot of times, the bigger the project is, the more inaccurate they are. And software project budgeting is one of the most notorious things that is off budget. There is a group that's called the Standish Group that produces a report called the Chaos Report biannually, and it talks about all these abuses and all these things about software project management. And one of the biggest things that they've started with from a long time ago, which is project size dictates the biggest success or failure of executing on time, scope, and budget.
So keep it simple. You know, the old KISS principle sometimes is a good starting point.
Yes, exactly.
How do we, I know we've done this before with multiple customers. We try to introduce the idea of making sure there are feedback loops. Whatever you build, you actually get feedback. Is this feature that's going to work for a customer? Is this feature that is actually defined the way the customer sees it as well? How does planning out the MVP, and then we can talk about even the milestones within the MVP, work with that feedback loop? How does that coincide?
Well, I mean, software engineering and development is one of the most trickiest things, because right now we talk about ideas, and software is completely in the mind of the unless you actually draw it out step by step, everyone has it in their mind. And so part of the feedback loop delivering every 2 weeks is to visualize what has been accomplished, so that first and foremost, the investor, the client, the one who is investing in this product, sees and gets to play with what they had in their mind. And, a lot of times what ends up happening with people is once they start to play with something, they realize, oh, you know what? That's not actually what I want. That may be not exactly what I imagined. Or maybe we misunderstood based on some of the ideas. And that the shorter that feedback loop is, the better we can course correct, whether it be we mistaken something, or people reevaluate, maybe that's not what I wanted. Maybe that's something else that I needed.
Okay. So a customer, let's just kind of, walk through a hypothetical scenario. A customer comes to you and says, hey, I know we did these couple sprints and then we demoed it to some potential customers and we really missed the mark. And of course, it's your fault as a software development company, but I want to fix this. I want to change this feature. We didn't really want that feature the way it's designed. What is the flow of communication? What is the expectation? How do we manage that so that at the end of the day, we get to a successful product?
Well, I think at the end, the raising of issues and identifying and being transparent with the flow of communication is extremely important. Whether the client or the users have, frustrations, or they have feedback that doesn't meet the mark, all that needs to be taken in and understood, because this is the shortcut, right? Wasting 2 weeks of work is less costly than constantly building something on top of that months later ends up not being valuable. So the flow of communication is, the sooner that we have trust that we can share honestly and openly with one another what we want and don't want, and talk about those true pain points, the quicker we can correct and save money and get to the right, product point.
Yep. I think shortening that feedback loop, both from the end customer to the product owner, from the product owner to the development team, I think is a huge win, right? The shorter that feedback loop, the clearer the communication, and perhaps even over communicate. I would say, I throw in my thought here as well, that part of our job as software development team is to ask a lot of questions, right? Not just accept what is being granted.
Yes, and that's something that we always need to do better is clarifying our assumptions. We all have them. We all think about them. And the good thing about working in a team is hopefully those assumptions get discussed and clarified with a team of people faster. And so that those types of things can kind of boil up to the surface at a faster rate.
So early on in the project, how much time do you spend educating the customer, even on the terminology and the, let's say, the time-based flow of operations, the things that, often come up in questions? What the heck is a sprint? How does that work? What does it mean we're working on more than one sprint at a time, like working on one, planning another, reviewing another one, and then educating them on milestones, what points are, all these fun things. How much do you try to do that up front, and how much does it as it comes up? What are some of the key educational pieces that you feel like you need to emphasize with the customer?
I mean, I would say that my strategy a lot of times when I talk with customers is not to try to tackle things from a direct, what I call, this is how it works in the software world, but give the illustration of how things work together. Kind of like what I would say to that is, our sprints are just like building Legos these days, right? When you buy a Lego, you buy these nice Star Wars Legos or whatever models that basically what it's supposed to be built into, right? And you take out your pieces, you have a bunch of pieces, you don't have a clue how they fit together, but your manual takes it step by step. You open one bag, you put together a section at a time, and that's really what our sprints are. You take one section at a time, you show it to them, you just explain it, and I think that's one of the strategies that I try to help our clients understand versus trying to just explain the technical jargon, and just to kind of make that relationship so it's easy for them to understand that really that's what it is. You want to build the end product, that's great, but we're going to do it step by step, and here's the instruction set, here's the steps that we're going to do, and then we're going to look at the next set of instructions and go from there, and you'll start to see it form piece by piece.
See, I'm that weird. When I was a kid, I almost never built what was on the box. I always asked myself a question: what else can I do with these Legos that was not on the box? So,
well, I mean, that's the great thing, right? Legos didn't have that really back in the day when we were kids, but now it's kind of like that's their de facto model, which makes lots of money.
Yes. Okay, so if I'm a business owner and you walk me through and we got an MVP defined and we know that this is the product that I can take to my investors, my customers, it doesn't have every bell and whistle that I had in mind. It doesn't have a feature. How do I plan to introduce them? Do I wait till it goes live and is financially stable before I start rolling out new features? How do I phase in future development throughout the process?
That's one of the most challenging questions. I was talking with a salesperson at another startup that's working on a SaaS product in the healthcare industry. And I think part of that challenge is every product is different. But there are some general rules, right? Which is, if it's especially a new product right out the door, right? The reality is you're going to have a 2-year cycle before your product can even become break even, just because of the long sales cycles. It's just you have to build a customer base, and then you got to build that reputation. So, of course, there's going to be time and sales and marketing effort to actually build something, not just from the product side of things. And so part of the building of the product and the testing cycles and the feedback loops is talking about what is the potential, right? The more you get user feedback, client feedback, customer feedback, the more potential that you say, hey, I got something that this feature is valuable. Maybe this is what they're really asking for. So maybe that's what we need to invest in even before, we know that we haven't made money on it yet, but we know that this is actually what people are asking for to get this product even a lot more developed. And so I think understanding those balancing act of course, it's going to take time to bring in revenue from a product standpoint. But the more you can farm the feedback and see what is the potential things that we should introduce and when, based on that feedback, is really important to actually build the right product that's going to be successful on the market.
Yeah, I think a couple episodes ago we had a guest who runs a real estate management product, and they said they do a lot of work, like you said, farming that feedback. They have built-in feature request upvotes and all these things from actual customers. I'm curious, as we go further down the road, and let's say you are making money from the product, there's a tension in my mind between let's make sure we don't lose what people are actually using and adding new features and optimizing the product or making it more hip or making it, more robust for the next wave of users. So how do you guide the customer through that balance of just keep adding on, or sometimes rethinking, and whether it's refactoring or, what else can you be doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tension point because I think the entrepreneur is the entrepreneur because they have an instinct, they have a vision, and you can never take that away, right? Of course, the market will say what the market wants, but the entrepreneur and the vision and entrepreneurial vision is so important in making those decisions, right? So sometimes the market will say funny things, and sometimes you have to block that out. And so there's that tension point of, at the end, what has made entrepreneurs successful is their instinct, their vision. So you can't disqualify that. You can't take that out in the decision-making process. At the same time, you also want to take in the feedback of what you're hearing. So that tension point of reviewing what the market's saying as well as what you believe your product to be, that's not a simple thing. We can only help aid the data point of saying, okay, this is what we do believe is in line with your product. But the entrepreneur has to make that decision because that is their instinct. Most companies succeed based on that vision from, that those core leaderships that really stake their careers on what they believe.
Yeah, and I think as the product matures, less and less do they rely on the instinct of entrepreneur, and usually you become more conservative in your growth and things like that because you already have established something that just works, right? And
Yeah.
Sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it thing comes into play. But yeah, it's a fascinating balance, particularly with the pace of innovation, right? I mean, right now, what's the big buzzword we hear from everybody, every potential
AI.
customer? AI. I mean, I talk with people saying, well, what AI can we add to our product? And I ask, well, that depends. What are you trying to solve? What is the business problem you're trying to solve? And is there a machine learning solution? Is there an automation solution? A little bit of a preview. We will have an episode coming as well soon. We're calling it Demystifying AI for Business. So that will be something we'll talk specifically to an AI specialist, removing some of the, pop buzzness out of the word AI and really digging into what it means. But hope folks tune into that one as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's come back to the startup world. Do you have in your head, without knowing the specifics of a project, a ballpark you should say, hey, an MVP should take you for an average startup X number of months, and then you can adjust the team size to meet it. And then the next feedback loop and the next phase you should plan to do after a certain period of time. Is there a formula you would recommend? And I understand it could vary based on, funding and overall scope of product, but is there a general, you don't want to wait 2 years to keep developing something before you send out a feedback loop, but you also don't want to rush and try to build something in 2 weeks.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I have a formula. I have a principle, which is basically, again, what we've talked about. Smaller is better just because it's more predictive in terms of costing and scheduling, right? Now, the real challenges, and I think from the startup world, a lot of times we rush into deciding versus understanding the underlying problem. I think that's why consultations is very important, to actually get in a room and test those assumptions, throw those questions at one another, say, really, is this the real value of our product? Because a lot of times when it's your baby, you assume a lot of extra things that are special about it versus someone who is untethered to that idea could ask those hard questions. And I think that's why consultation is so valuable, that it gets at that root of what is really the minimum viable product, which then shrinks that product to the smallest potential sizable feature to deliver. That being the case, I think for what I'd say small to medium, endeavors in terms of products, I think a 3 month milestone to get first features out. I'm not saying that's the MVP, but that's where you can get a checkpoint in to get some of your main features developed to see you're on the right track. I would say for a medium team, somewhere where you're investing 3 to 6 people on a project, probably 3 to 6 months is a good target for an MVP for that level of complexity in terms of the size of what you're trying to deliver.
Okay. One of the questions that I get often is, obviously we are visual humans, many of us are, and we want to make it look cool and pretty. Where do you find that balance between, let's say, the UX side of things for a new product and new tool, the functions like security and system optimization and making sure all the code delivery is perfect, and the actual functionality? Or is it just, let's do bare bones, let's make sure it works, who cares what it looks like, even if it's not perfect on the back end?
I mean, that's a case study in Apple, right? Function versus form. Form is very important to nowadays everything that we do. But of course, without core functionality, whatever is sexy doesn't mean anything. There's stories on both sides of you got too much function and it's not very, the form is ugly. People don't go to it. But at the same time, if something's pretty but has nothing that it delivers, it doesn't capture the audience either. And so it's a funny balance, whereas your core MVP, that functionality has to be rock solid. It has to deliver a value set that your customers love and engage in. But it also does have to have some base layer of, it looks well. Like we are in a very visual world these days. And so you do have to have some sort of design thought into it, just so that your core features snap, pop. It just makes sense to people.
So it is always going to be a balancing game between core functionality, performance, and UI, UX, so that you can't leave one of them behind, but obviously core functionality leads the way.
Yes, you definitely, if it doesn't bring any value to anyone, doesn't matter what it looks like. But you do have to dress it up.
Okay. Last thought I'm kind of having here is, when it comes to estimations, and we know that there are many, many ways to do estimations, and you already talked about the fact that the bigger the project, especially when you get into months and months of estimation, it gets really hard, right? To be accurate in anything you're doing. I always use the illustration when it comes to Titanic. If in the last hour before hitting the iceberg, they would have needed to make a 40-degree course correction, which is almost impossible to make with the size of the ship they were at. However, if they would have made a correction 3 hours early, it would have been less than 1 degree. So, it's thinking in advance, and it's also, you can't estimate everything is going to happen. But within the models that that exist, whether it's, the points, the t-shirt sizes, and everything else, does it matter what models you use when it comes to business people? We're not talking about the software developers that work with you, but if as a business person who's trying to solve a technological problem, do I care how you guys go by estimating? Do I need to get input in, hey, I think this is actually more complicated than you guys think? Or do I just let the process kind of happen and say, hey, when is this thing ready? What is my input level on this estimation?
I think definitely, a client doesn't need to know the depth of meanings of anything. And the reality is estimation techniques are just predictors, which mean, hey, something is very easy. We think we know what it is, and something's very hard. Now, I think within reason, any client, we that's the feedback cycle, right? It's like if we're saying that we think something is extremely difficult to do, but it doesn't match up with your thoughts, of course, that's a feedback cycle and conversation that needs to be had. And that's really what it is. Estimation is, let's take out the mystics of the how. It's just how difficult is something to build and how easy it is. And if we're saying one thing, but then that doesn't make sense to you, of course, that is feedback that is absolutely necessary to have.
Yeah, I think there are many times where the customer goes, well, this should be easy. I've seen this done before, right? And we started getting into like, oh, well, hold on. You're taking a part that actually doesn't belong here. Let's break it up. And I think, the old how do you eat an elephant joke is one tiny bite at a time. And I think that helps, is even breaking down our planning to the smallest possible piece will limit the misunderstanding or the errors or the potential risk factors, I would say.
Yeah, and the reality is the structures that we use in software development, even with the world of going to agile, a lot of people make this overly complex about all the processes. Really, agile is about communication. It's about breaking down things to smaller things to have quicker conversations about what we understand, so that we can actually understand each other simply, easily, and we all are on the same page. And really, that's what it is. Software development in today's world and agile is really, how do we talk about things in very tangible, quick ways so that we all understand each other? It's really about conversations.
And I think having those conversations removes the mystery out of the process and removes the, pitfalls. We have a customer we both know that said our previous developer just went away for 3 months and came back with a product, never asking us any questions. And I followed up and said, how did that turn out? Like, well, that's why you guys are rebuilding it now. So
Yep.
that happens too. So, okay, Steve, thank you very much for your input. Let me do this. What is the final thought you want to leave with any, let's just say, startup founder has a great idea, is nervous about getting started, has tons of conflicting advice people are giving him on what to do with the MVP, how to manage the funding, or he's even self-funding. Calm him down, kind of talk directly at him, and just kind of give him the best piece of advice you can give to get the project going.
I would say that the best advice is keep it simple. Like we said, the reality is there's so many things that you can't control in terms of what you're thinking. The best thing is just to start small, start getting your idea out there. I think, of course, having people around you to test your thoughts and test your assumptions are key to that. And so talking through a consultation or talking with people to basically kind of challenge your assumptions, challenge what you think your product is very important. But really, that's still theory, right? Until you actually start putting things on development and actually getting something that people can touch and feel, you're not going to know what your idea is really valued at. The secret, is really about how do you get there fast without, spending a bunch. And so that your idea starts to show up and you can kind of say, now I know what I have. I know what's becoming formed, and I know what it took to get there. And, those iterative kind of like, as you start to see things happening, takes a lot of the other like fears away. So a lot of it is, start talking, start getting started so that you can start to see what you have, because otherwise nothing will ever form. And timing to market is important these days. That's why everyone's rushing to AI. Somewhat is a folly, in my opinion, but that is a timing thing, right? You want to get your ideas out there. And so that's why you want to start small and test your assumptions so that you get to see it.
That's some good, wise advice, and I hope some of the folks listening to our Tectonic Lounge episode will take it to heart and get out there and try out some new ideas. It's better to try them out and learn from them than just sit there and go, well, I could have built that, right? Gee, I wish I would have done something and regret it later on. So, Steve, thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of this show. Thank you to all the listeners and the viewers. Please like our episodes. I was going to say like and subscribe, but it's a little too cliche. So, but thank you very much for listening. We appreciate the feedback that we do get on the episodes, and tune in for the next episode coming soon.
Thank you.